but I'll just be civil here. But we all know what kind of people they are if they want to drive people out of their homes and scare children and poison your well and kill your animals and destroy your olives just when you waited all year to harvest.
G'day, welcome to Bogan Intel. Today's guest is Suzan Wahhab, the chair of Palestinian Christians in Australia. And Suzan is on the program today to talk about the plight of Christians in Palestine, the Holy Land, and the Middle East. For over 2 years since Israel's aggression in response to October 7, there hasn't been enough news about the persecution of Christian communities that is happening on almost a daily basis. In Gaza, Christian communities have been almost bombed into oblivion, with the last 600 that remain cowering in two of the last remaining intact houses of worship. And over in the West Bank, there has been horrific scenes of rampaging settler groups running through Christian majority areas in the West Bank, burning and looting their way through. Suzan will share her experience as a Palestinian Christian. She'll share some of the struggle the Christians who can trace their lineage back to the biblical figures of old are facing every day, from having their olive harvests disrupted and destroyed to having their houses burnt down. So please stick around for a great episode with Suzan Wahhab. Thank you very much for joining us, Suzan Wahhab.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Joel.
It's been great to link with you through a friend of ours to have you on to speak about your perspective as a Palestinian Christian. So just to get started, would like to know, just for the listeners, a little bit more about yourself, where you're from and who you are.
Yeah, well, I was born in Jerusalem and during the Israeli occupation, and I lived in Ramallah with my family for the first 17 years of my life until we came to Australia in the mid 80s. And I finished school here and went to university and did accounting and set up my own practice. And I've been working for the past 30 years in it. So, and I wrote a book. It's called Money Intelligence. And the book is based on my family's story of dispossession and my grandparents' story of dispossession as well in 1948. And I kind of linked it with what I learned, being an accountant. And it's to do with if you lose everything in your life, whether it's your home, your land, they take away your job, you still got the intelligence in you. And so that's what I based the whole concept of money intelligence on, that you've got the education in your mind, you've got your values in your heart, and you can start again. And that's the Palestinian story.
And it does seem to be a real quintessential Palestinian story, the one of education, a very highly literate and educated people who obviously have placed that wisdom and intelligence as something that's, irreplaceable and something that's, important to everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when people ask my parents, why did you come? Because, they had a good business there, they had a house, Ramallah was a good place to stay. And when we came, it was just a year before the 1987 Intifada. And the reason my parents said it's to keep the kids safe and to give us a high level of education. Yeah, it's a big thing for our community. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So it's everybody should, most Palestinians I know have minimum 2 degrees.
It's such a story, and I was speaking to another Palestinian guest we had on, Ahmed Alabadla.
Ahmed Abadallah.
And he, same thing. He mirrored exactly what you're saying there, and himself. Being highly studious and, really grasping onto any education opportunity that can enrich oneself. something that a lot of Australians could probably learn a little bit from these
Indeed.
days.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so look, I would like
and
to
and
ask.
and
Oh,
and to learn for learning as well, like to become more cultured, more educated, more a person of the world. And we can't sit still and think this is it, because the world is changing and we have to change with it. So it's also a lesson for everybody around the world to keep at the top of what's going on in the world, because things are moving all the time. Yeah.
totally. Yeah, it's some
Mm.
really good advice that many people can latch onto there.
Yes.
Especially in Australia, we are kind of detached sometimes from that world. This big island continent at the
Mm.
bottom of the earth, and yeah,
Yes.
I feel sometimes there's a little bit of a callousness in the Australian population towards some of these, developments, as you say. I'd like to
Yeah.
ask you though, could you, share a childhood memory, from Jerusalem, growing up? How was it, essentially growing up in this incredible city of Jerusalem?
Well, I was born in Jerusalem, but I grew up in Ramallah.
Okay. Yep. Sorry. Yep. How was it growing up in
Yeah.
Ramallah? Yeah. What's your?
And
Yeah.
Ramallah is not far from Jerusalem. It's only 10 kilometers, and we were always going to Jerusalem at least every second week. Oh, it was beautiful. Like, I just like my family is religious. So my mom is Catholic on my mom's family side, and my dad is Orthodox. So, and we used to live in the Anglican church compound. So there's the Anglican church in Ramallah, which is opposite the Catholic church on the other side of the street. And we used to live in a two-bedroom apartment on top of the priest's house. And I remember, I was always at church. But on Sundays, I used to do Sunday schools at the Anglican church, then go to the Catholic mass, and then go down to like downtown Ramallah and go to the Orthodox church, because the Orthodox church mass goes for a long time. So I would catch the last hour of the Orthodox church before I go and visit my grandparents. Yeah, we had, like Christianity, within the Christian community in Palestine is big for us. It's not just by name. We're practicing all the time. And the biggest memory, the bestest memory, is actually during Easter, when the Holy Fire comes from the Holy Sepulchre to all the towns. They kind of the Holy Fire actually spreads all over the world. Many churches end up getting the Holy Fire, the Easter Holy Fire, and then it goes to all the churches around the world, and it arrives in Ramallah, and we have like a big ceremony in the middle of the streets. It's a big thing for Palestinian Christians. It's one of the best memories that I have, with doing these things. Yeah.
Being a devout Christian, being born in the Holy Land, coming from a family that traces its roots back to day dot in the Holy Land. Am I wrong?
Day dot Pentecost, day dot. Yes.
So what? The
Yeah,
Pentecostal flame was floating around somewhere, and your family was there, right?
for sure. When we read the Bible for Palestinian, especially Palestinian Christians, when we read the Bible, we are reading about our ancestors. We are reading about the followers of Jesus Christ 2000 years ago. And when I came to Australia, people were like confused that I was Christian and from Palestine. Well, first of all, a lot of people denied that there is Palestine, and they always corrected me that it was Israel, which I didn't deny, because it's in the Bible as well. And these people are our ancestors as well. But I just wanted to tell people that Palestine does exist, and we are the original inhabitants of the land. We've been there for thousands of years. But a lot of people would ask me, when did you convert? So many people, because they thought that I converted when I came to Australia, because I saw the light, and I learned about Christianity in Australia,
Incredible.
and I used to get upset and try to explain to people, and then I started memorizing this line. When somebody asks me that question, I'm gonna say, my ancestors converted your ancestors 2000 years ago and spread the gospel to Europe.
And I found it interesting how you straight away identified with those Old Testament biblical figures as well. And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a
Yeah.
little bit, that there are those genetic results that say that people from Palestine, Palestinian Christians
Muslims as
and
well.
Muslims are the
Yeah.
closest genetic links, not only to Christian figures, but going back into the lands of David, right?
100%, for sure. When we read about them, they are our ancestors, can't deny it. And what most people don't understand is um, that even the Muslim Palestinians, before they became Muslim, they were Christian.
Hmm.
And the Christians, before they became Christian, they were Jewish, Roman, or Greek. Because if you read the history and read the Bible, um, all these people were living in the land, even at the time of Jesus. And a lot of Greeks and Romans basically became, of course, as with the Byzantine Empire, all the people in that land, in the area, not only Palestine, but Lebanon, Syria, Iraq area, all that, they all became Christian. And then
And I'm
with
sorry.
the advent of Muslim rule, a lot of people converted. Uh, and if you look at the history, even up until the Crusades times, which is the 11th or the 12th century, a lot of the people in the land in the Holy Land. So, even Lebanon and Palestine, a lot of the population were still Christian,
Mm.
because the Muslims did not force conversion when they arrived in the 7th century. And so they were free to practice, and they were protected to practice their religion. And so when the Crusaders came, they were surprised that all these Greek Orthodox people were living there, and they're all Christian, and like there wasn't that many Muslims. I mean, there were Muslims, of course, but it wasn't like everybody's Muslim as there's hardly any Christian.
It wasn't like
Um,
Baghdad or Damascus under the caliphate, was it? I mean, it was quite a multicultural, multi-ethnic melting pot right there, wasn't
Multicultural.
it? Yeah.
Correct. That's right. But the Crusades, basically, with 100 years of rule, eroded that Christian-Muslim relations that were built over, from the 7th to the 12th century. And a lot of people ended up after Saladin took over, a lot of people ended up converting. And a lot of conversions happened actually during the Ottoman Empire's rule, especially at the end of the Ottoman rule when the Ottoman Empire was disintegrating. A lot of, especially Palestinian Christians, were converting to Islam.
At
And
the
so,
barrel of a gun, or
not at the barrel of a gun, but because the Ottomans were, like they wanted to get more money because their empire was disintegrating. And so they imposed a huge amount of tax on the Christians.
so they increased the
So
jiz. Is that the jizra tax?
jizya,
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
increased the taxes, that for the Christians, that a lot of people, if they had land, they basically, wanted to keep their wealth. So they converted. So if you see, you will see a lot of families with the same name, but they might be Muslim and they might be Christian,
Mm.
especially in Palestine. So yeah, so sometimes you have to ask, are you the Christian side or the Muslim side? Yeah.
Well, I grew up in an area where it was kind of like that, where people were playing football, and they're like, "Are you a Maronite Lebanese or a
Mm,
Muslim Lebanese or an
yeah,
Orthodox Syrian?" And yeah, there was a lot of those discussions in the schoolyard. And
yeah,
as a young Irish Catholic, I was always fascinated by these kind of like delineations in the Levant and the Middle East. A lot of my friends sort of had, and how they broke bread together over certain issues or certain things that they shared, cultural affinities that they sort of shared as being fellow countrymen or people from the same region. So it's
Yeah. The culture is strong in the Middle East. The culture is strong. So, like, being Arabic and being, in the Middle Eastern or Levantine is big for us. But also the religion is big for both
totally.
Christian and Muslim. It's like, it's like the be it or end all kind of thing.
There were some rivalries
Um,
too. I didn't get to
and
mention that.
rivalries, and
I,
even like denominations as well, Christian denominations rivalries.
Totally. And yes, I mean, like even the Protestant Catholic one is legendary enough in its own right. And look, I would like to ask you a little bit. I mean, it's such a vibrant area, right? So after the fall of the Roman Empire, there
Yeah,
was the Eastern Roman Empire that essentially took over from the Western
yeah,
Roman Empire. And
yes.
so was the area Hellenized up until the point of the Islamification of the area, of the region?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right. So up until the 7th century, it was Hellenic. So all the area under the Byzantine Empire, the Middle East, where Turkey is now, everything was Greek. Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
And
and
then
Greek
so
Orthodox.
totally, and majority Greek Orthodox, and then there was a essentially Umar ibn al-Khattab,
Al-Khattab.
and the massive transformation of the region under Islam.
Mhm.
You mentioned that Jizra tax and so can you explain a little bit how Judaism and Christianity was held under the umbrella of Islam, just for the audience a little bit early
Yeah.
on?
Actually, before I mention about that, I want to also say that under the Byzantine Empire, the Jews were not welcome in Jerusalem. So the Jews were barred from Jerusalem up until the 7th century.
Interesting
And
point.
yeah, that's what a lot of people don't realize. So, there was Christian persecution of the Jews in the Holy Land before the arrival of Umar ibn al-Khattab and the Muslims. And under the Muslim rule, they welcomed them back to Jerusalem.
Yeah, isn't
Uh,
there a part where Umar's looking for the Temple Mound
yes,
and essentially because he wants to pray there, and the Christians are like, oh well, it's just a rubbish heap. Like they'd essentially
that's
trashed it, and there was rubbish stacked up on there, and it was he that restored
yeah.
the sites and things like that, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But the second temple was destroyed by the Romans before Christianity. But all that
Of
area
course.
was not looked after. That is true under Byzantine Empire rule. And when the Muslims came, they wanted to, restore the presence of Jews in Jerusalem, and so they invited the Jews to come to Jerusalem and restore it. But the third temple was never built, and the Muslims built what is now the Dome of the Rock and the Haram Sharif. Um, yeah, yeah. But the
So
under Muslim rule, the Jews and the Muslims were considered the people of the book, and they were basically protected minorities. Well, at the time, they were not really minorities because they were the majority of the population. But as time went by, with people converting, they became minorities. Oh, well, the Christians became minorities, but the Jews were always a minority in the Holy Land. Yeah, but that was the beginning of Jewish presence in Jerusalem after they were barred by the Byzantine Empire. I don't know what year that was, but yeah, the Byzantine Empire, one of the Byzantine empires barred the Jews from Jerusalem.
and
Unfortunately, yes.
yeah, I'm with you. And so for 100 years there, the Ottoman Empire kind of administered the whole region, right?
The Ottoman Empire, I think, administered about 400. I think the
Yep.
Ottomans came around 1400, 1500. Yeah, in 1500 something, I think.
And so
Yes.
there was a status quo there that saw Christians, Jews, and Muslims living under Ottoman rule.
Yes.
And so we get to a point where pre-Israel, Christians amounted to about 10% of the Palestinian population, right?
Correct. Yeah. When the British came in 1918, there's different statistics. There's between 10 to 15% of the population was Christian.
So we
Yeah.
moved to today then, Susan, where there's only 1,200 Christians that remain in Gaza.
600 as of today, because half of them came to Australia, mainly to Australia.
Yeah, right. What is the plight of a Christian in Gaza today, if I can ask you?
Yeah, well, we've been at the forefront of looking after those people that have arrived. So we've met maybe between 400 to 500 people so far that have arrived from Gaza to Australia. The majority of Christians that came to Australia from Gaza. And right now there's only 600 left, 200 in one church and 400 in the Catholic Church, 200 in the Orthodox Church. The situation is not very good. The people that are arriving here want to get their brother, their sister, their uncle, their family, everybody, they want them out because there's nothing left in Gaza. And whatever you see on TV, they tell you is not what you really feel when you are there, because the air is polluted, like it's all rubble, and the rubble looks like it's, of course, because because of these bombs, there's pollution. You don't know what you're going to end up with, cancer or anything. People just see on the TV, but what they're telling you is this smell. There's a smell of rotting meat, rotting bodies as they're walking around, even though the buildings are, destroyed. But the people that were inside those buildings are dead under the rubble. And so the smell in Gaza is horrible. People got sick from various things. People died from drinking, a bottle of water, and they thought it was clean, but 35-year-old chemist in the church died just drinking the wrong water. People are dying from not getting the medicine, so they could have heart problems, diabetes, things that can be prevented are now people are just slowly dying. No life, no, you can't have the kids go to school. There's no schools, no universities. People are like, for the Christians, the 600 Christians living in Gaza right now, they're sheltering in the two churches. There's no jobs, no life, no, most of these people's houses have been destroyed, and they're living on a mattress on the floor for the past 2 years. Eating canned food, and a lot of times they said when there was no food, they made bread from the hay, the hay that you feed animals, and things like that. One lady said she had to eat an apple. She had to eat an apple. She couldn't not eat an apple. She hasn't eaten an apple for 2 years. And it was like, I needed to eat an apple. She paid $50 for that, one apple. I mean, you can't do that every day, but
So, you've got people there craving for apples, cowering in churches, in two churches, right? So can you explain what these sites are and their significance to Palestinian Christians, and how many sites were there before the camp bombing campaign started?
Yeah, well, there's the St. Porphyrios Orthodox Church is the third oldest church in the world. And it was built by St. Porphyrios, another Greek. And it's been there for so long. There's also Saint Hilarion Monastery. I'm not sure what the status of the monastery is, but I know that it was bombed during this campaign. I'm not sure if there's anybody left living in there. There's also other Christian sites that were bombed, I've been told. There's a Baptist church there, like a small little place that was bombed as well. Al Ahli Hospital, which is the Baptist Anglican hospital in Gaza, was bombed as well. It's still functioning, but at a less less capacity. The Catholic Church was built in the 70s in Gaza, and it was also bombed as well. So the Arab Orthodox Cultural Center was just finished building it a year before the war, and it looked so beautiful. I saw the photos. It looked beautiful, and it was completely destroyed. And they used to hold events there because it was, it's beautiful theater. They used to do even like Muslim celebrations, and it was used by all communities, and even the government, even Hamas was using it for their their official um, celebrations and things. Yeah, everything has been destroyed.
G'day. If you like what you're seeing and you appreciate the broad range of guests we're having on this program, please like and subscribe. It does a hell of a lot to train that algorithm that seems to like to tuck away good content like this behind cat videos. And also make sure you follow Bogan Intel, where you get your favorite podcasts, or go to boganintel.com, where you can get our regular article and see all the content that we're posting up here. One thing that I think just gets overlooked, and it might be a similar story to some of the Christians you first encountered in Australia that were quite daft to your background, where you might come from. I think the same thing applies to just more broadly Australian understanding about this vibrant community that lives in Palestine, right? I do want to speak a little bit now about the attacks on Christians more broadly throughout Palestine and the Holy Land. And I want to go back to Taiba, which is, the last all-Christian village in the West Bank, over in the West Bank. And there's just been some scenes over the last few months in particular of just these kind of crazed gangs running around in Christian towns and villages across the West Bank. It has a biblical craze about it. And these people are running around like burning and, entire villages down. The sites are incredible. And what sets them apart from what we're seeing in Gaza is, this high-tech, very powerful ordnance that's being dropped in Gaza, opposed to this handmade destruction from these settlers where, they're poking the eyes of lambs out in their shelters and dropping cinder blocks on their heads. This is a very unsettling thing to see. And I was wondering if you could sort of, detail a little bit about what's happening in the West Bank right now with Christians.
Well, because, our charity has been known for providing shelter to families arriving from Gaza, and also from other towns in the West Bank. We've had a few families that arrived as well. People in Palestine think that Palestinian Christians in Australia can bring everybody to Australia. So we've been getting so many emails from people saying, I'm a Palestinian Christian, I'm scared for my family, they took my land, they did this to us, I need to come to Australia, can you help me? So the feeling from a lot of families in Palestine is that it's no longer a safe place to stay, to live, especially in the West Bank. And where they are close to settlements, and unfortunately, the settlements are everywhere in the West Bank. They're surrounding all of the West Bank towns and villages. And the way the Israelis do it is they basically choke various towns from each other by putting these barriers and checkpoints, and make life harder for people. And now you need a permit to go from one town to another, not only just wait at the checkpoint to go from one town to another. Now they want you to apply for a permit if you want to leave Ramallah, let's say, to go to Bethlehem. So the situation there is really bad for both Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Muslims. And, the people just want to secure their family. I've got family or distant relatives who have called me personally and said, can you get us out of, Palestine and get us to Australia? The settlers are encroaching on our town, and we're scared they're going to do the same thing that they've done in Gaza and level our homes, and then we'll end up with nothing. I want to see if I can leave now before they do that and harm my children. So the situation there is basically a place of lawlessness. And I would say that it's the Israeli government that is to blame, especially the leadership there. I'm not going to name names, but you know who they are. They're wanted by the ICC, by the way, those guys. And they encourage those lawless settlers to scare the population. They want to scare the Palestinians to leave. There's no other explanation for them to go and, destroy your olive trees while you're doing your olive harvest. There's no other explanation to destroy your cattle, your sheep, your goats. There's no other explanation to do that, because really the West Bank is supposedly a safe place, run in conjunction with the Israelis, between the Israelis and the Palestinian Authority, to maintain security. So if you're telling me that, there's no Hamas in the West Bank, that the people living on the land, in the towns and the villages, the Palestinians living on the land in the towns and villages, pose no security threat to Israel, why are you sending your thuggish settlers? And I think that's a very gentle term to call them.
I was about to say thuggish is a very complimentary.
I would call them, yeah. But I'll just be civil here. But we all know what kind of people they are. If they want to drive people out of their homes and scare children and poison your well and kill your animals and destroy your olives just when you waited all year to harvest. And a lot of the farmers in Palestine, they borrow money the whole year from loan lenders, so that they can pay their loans when they harvest their olives, and you go and destroy their olives. So what are you trying to, and you know that, what message are you trying to send, and what are you trying to do? You're trying to destroy families, to basically walk off their land. It's not peace that they seek, especially this right-wing extremist government right now in charge. It's not peace that they seek. They seek as much land as possible with less Palestinians as possible.
And despite all the half-measured reassurances from the international community, which have been appalling, and the insistence from Trump and the UN, the red lines about the West Bank and all those things in place, what we're seeing on the other side in Israel, the fast tracking of the occupation of the West Bank, and we're seeing the Knesset approving invasion, essentially annexation plans for the West Bank. Yeah. So this is all happening. The language is there. The Ben Gavirs, the Smotriches are talking this heat,
Yeah.
and the settlers are acting accordingly. Now, I mean,
Yes.
you mentioned they were thuggish, but look, I mean, I want to go a bit further. I think these guys are fucking mental. And you know, there's a generational kind of transfer of hatred and enmity that's in these mostly young people that I see. You know, the footage of that old lady harvesting her olives being knocked
Oh,
on their head
yes.
there. You know, that
Yes.
was just it's just
Yeah.
incredible to see these young people thinking they can act like this. And
I know.
when you mention the trees there too, and the olives, you know, it shows the contrast between the mentalities of the two groups. I mean, you've got these people cultivating and harvesting these ancient olive trees that mean more than just the yield. I mean, there's a
That's
connection
right.
in the roots in the ground, right?
Of
And then
course.
contrasting that with the destruction, with cementing the wells, with cutting the trees down when they're flowering. You know, the hatred towards the people that are in their way is one thing, but it seems like the Zionists also have a hatred towards nature itself, for not being able to control it completely, and it's just it melts you a little bit. And I want to ask, like, we're seeing the oldest Christian populations on the planet being, you know, wholesale terrorized and you know,
Yes.
marginalized and destroyed by this invading force. Now, the Christians around the world are feeling one way or the other about this conflict. On one side, we have Christians that are unbound by by Zionism, that you know, mostly wholesale appalled by what's happening here. And we've seen, you know, the
Yeah.
Pope, we've seen, you know, bishops and hierarchies of churches around the world condemning this. But then we also have another group of Christians, the Christian Zionists, which wholesale back Israel's every move, essentially. Now, I would like to sort of ask you, you know, what is the disconnect here in the global Christian community? You know, because this is an appalling thing to see the original Christian communities, you know, being attacked like this. So what is the outcry, and is the response, you know, proportionate to what's happening right now?
Yeah. Bishop Atallah Hanna, he's the Greek Orthodox Bishop of Sebastia. He said, "You can't be. There's no such thing as Christian Zionist. You're either a Christian or a Zionist." And you know, like when I read that, I just realized that those Christian Zionists are not really Christian. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You can't be calling for the destruction of people, whether they're Muslim or Christian. You can't be cheering on more bombs to fall on Gaza and then call yourself a Christian just because, oh yeah, you know, you support the state of Israel. You can support the state of Israel. There's no issue with that. Okay? You can support the state of Palestine. There's no issue with that. But to say that you're a Christian and you're supporting the state of Israel to destroy and cause wholesale destruction of land, property, and people and animals. Yeah, we forgot the animals. They're beings as well. To call for all of that destruction and still say we stand with Israel, that does not make you a Christian. You can't be. You can't be. If you sit there in your heart and you read the Bible, you can't say that I agree with what the Israelis are doing and I'm still a Christian Zionist. You know, I met many Jewish people here in Australia who do not agree with what the state of Israel does. Now, that doesn't make them anti-Israel. They're anti the actions of the state of Israel and anti those guys who are running this, you know, that, you know, Israel and making it, you know, un-Jewish. The, the current government is making the state of Israel un-Jewish because that is not what Jewish religion would say. That's not what Jewish people would behave. And so the Christian Zionists also need to wake up and say, that's not what a state, whether it's Jewish or Christian, that's not how it should be behaving.
And
Um,
sorry, Susan, the Schofield Bible is something that pops up here, and I'm
oh,
wondering if
it's
you could.
not our Bible. It's
No,
not
no,
our
no,
Bible. I'm
not our
sorry.
Bible at all. No, no. But what I'm saying is
No.
this, that the Schofield Bible was introduced to American
Yes.
evangelical populations, right? Now, within this Bible, it was a cheap and easy kind of text that was distributed quite widely for free,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
there were some addendums and some little asterisks throughout this
Footnotes.
Bible, footnotes that have essentially
Footnotes that
changed.
became like, oh, it's no longer a footnote. It's like, oh my God, it's the whole page.
So that's incredible, right? So there was this sort of divergence,
Yes.
in the Christian movement
They're not
here.
Christian.
That's right. So can
They
you
are not
explain?
Christian.
Can you explain a little bit about what these Schofield Bible Christian Zionists are doing? Are being so associated with Israel. What do they see as the importance of supporting Netanyahu's Israel as like something from the Bible?
Yeah, I think a lot of Christians kind of collapse in their view, whether it started 150 years ago or right now. A lot of Christians are being deceived in seeing the state of Israel as the Israel of the Bible. The state of Israel is created through empire. If it weren't for the British Empire, there would not have been a state of Israel. Like weakening the Palestinian population for 30, 40 years while they were where the Palestinians were under British rule from 1918 to 1948, and the advent of Jewish groups and guerrillas to come and take over Palestinian towns and villages and throw hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes and drive them out of their lands and dump them in places like Gaza and Jordan and Lebanon so that they can create their state. That's not what God demands, and that's not really how Israel would come to life. Come back to life after 2,000 years of exile. I don't believe that that's really the Israel of the Bible.
Wasn't Jesus railing against the new Israel? Wasn't he calling for that old Israel to return? That was the whole reason Jesus
Then,
was sort
then
of getting around, right?
the new Israel is that look, I'm not going to be politically correct here, but the new Israel is the covenant of that Jesus brought into the world. If I were a true Christian, I would say that the new Israel is Jesus' message to the Jews and Jesus' message to the world.
Definitely. And just historically, essentially Jeremiah 8 was a part of the Bible there that spoke about the second covenant, right? So I mean, there were the prophets in the Old Testament who actually told the Israelites that they no longer had their covenant with God, and so Jesus was the second act, was the covenant that was for everyone, right? I suppose, and that caused the problem where one recognized the Messiah and the Talmudic Pharisee Jews essentially denied him.
Yeah, that's the split. That's that split that happened with the Jews that followed Jesus, which we are the descendants from, and the Jews that did not believe in Jesus and believed what their religious leaders told them, that Jesus was fake. And that's the schism basically that happened because a lot of Christians, over the centuries, for the past 2,000 years, there's symbolism of the new Israel being the sign of the cross.
Now, I would like to talk with a Christian about the biblical and religious kind of sensibilities and not sensibilities, the religious and ethnic kind of factors that are, affecting this region. So, I mean, when you look at the geopolitics of Israel and their strategy and the way that they're waging war, with 6 or 7 nations at the moment, I saw a strike in Lebanon only overnight, another strike in Lebanon. I heard 18 Christians were killed in Lebanon in a single family the other day. But when you look at the geopolitics of it, it doesn't quite make sense. You kind of like, what's the end game if you're looking at realpolitik of Israel. We can't quite figure it out. But when I start using a biblical geopolitics and you start looking at it through that lens, you can see other things coming into play. And things like Greater Israel, for example, which has a delineation that goes up into Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. And there are parts of it now that have been captured. I mean, in Mount Hermon, which is in Syria, it's been captured by Israel. And I've heard that there are archaeologists and rabbis and people going around looking for fallen Nephilim in burial sites around there. So there are these red heifers, genetically engineered red heifers that are a biblical requirement to sacrifice.
Ready for the third temple to be built.
So, we're talking about this. There's, a bunch of strange settler ceremonies happening inside the Alaska compound, which are obviously illegal. And, when October 7 happened, it was Benjamin Netanyahu himself that came out and said, these people are Amalek. That term Amalek, is referred to a tribe that essentially, they gave instructions to salt the land and kill every living being, right? So where is this coming in? And what is the enmity towards Christians with regards to this biblical stanza in Israel's configuration right now?
Look, I think right now there's a group of people that have taken over Israel that are motivated by, messianic and Old Testament theology. It doesn't see the whole geopolitical things that are happening in the world, doesn't take that into account. And I think Israelis after 7th of October are just bombing indiscriminately just to show that they are a force to be reckoned with. And that's the message they want to send out to various communities who don't want to sign with Israel. And I think they're not looking at it from the long-term perspective. They might win in the short term, destroy families, destroy Gaza, destroy Lebanon. But in the long run, what's your end game to live peacefully in the Middle East? Are you going to keep waging wars on your neighbors all the time? Are you going to live in a state of fear like that, for how long? Are you going to keep subjecting your population to, various times where the local population, whether they're Palestinian, Syrian, or Lebanese, to do an intifada on you and do an uprising, and all of a sudden Israelis, innocent Israelis also die in the meantime as well? Are you going to keep your people in a state of siege? You're creating, really, in the end, yes, you're trying to expand the land, and they have been slowly since 1948, taking more land as they wait every decade or every 20 years to grab more land. But really, at the end of the day, even if you make it a greater Israel, you're still creating a ghetto. Yeah. You're still living in a ghetto surrounded by hostile countries. And the reason these hostile countries are hostile is because you don't want to make peace with them. You don't want to acknowledge their presence, and you want to pretend that this is all ours and you guys don't exist. Oh, I don't see any Palestinians here. Like since from even before 1948 till the 1990s, even after the Israelis signed the Oslo Accord, a lot of Israelis, even in government, were saying there's no such thing as Palestinians. And even when you hear Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and even Netanyahu, it's like there's no such thing as Palestinians. Then who are you talking to? And then if there's no such thing as Palestinians, who are you bombing in Gaza? There is no such thing as Palestinians. Who is the enemy then? Who are you bombing? Who are these people? Did they just show
They're
up?
Amalek.
You
They're
know,
Amalek now.
they're Amalek.
Everyone's
I
Amalek.
forgot they're Amalek.
That's right.
My
They've
God.
changed. And I mean, this is the insanity of it all. And you mentioned this, short term, they might turn the whole area into
Okay.
rubble. I think
Yeah.
Syria is a great example of this, right? I mean, what was there before may not have been the preferred partner of choice, but then they've destroyed that. There's now Ahmed al-Shara and a very different Syria. Now, they might think they can control that force at the moment, and then they might be able to parlay with it. But over time, all that lawlessness around these Israeli borders surely can't be good for its
No,
long-term
none at all.
survival.
No, none at all. Because you've got other powers that could come and arm these groups, like Hezbollah got armed by Iran, and But I think the Israelis take it one step at a time. So in their mentality, they think we're just gonna we're gonna manage the conflict, or we're gonna manage the situation now, and not think about 100 years or 200 years in advance. We're going to manage this. And then as new generations come up, the next generation will manage the next phase of the
The
conflict.
fallout.
The fallout. That's right. And I mean, the whole world is run like that. We all manage, even with the economy, with everything, we manage. Well, like even our governments, elected democratic governments, we try to manage situations as they are, like right now. Like even with the climate, you don't want to really deal with it. We're just managing, we're just doing a little bit, just a bit. But you're not going, let us fix this place properly, and people don't do that. We don't do that. People manage. We just manage conflicts, and in the end, at some point, everything erupts, and that's where periods end, eras end, the civilizations end, because that civilization or that empire kept managing the conflict, not dealing with the issues, not dealing with how to create the kingdom of God on earth. They're just managing the various groups to keep them poor, keep them enslaved, while their little ghetto is, if you look at settlements in Israel and in the West Bank, they all look beautiful, nice gardens, lots of water, so many pools. They're managing that beautiful oasis inside their communities, and they don't give a shit that excuse my French, that the Palestinian villages and towns have no water that they stole from us. They don't have any pools. They don't have they've been the whole resource has been sucked out. We don't care about them, and we just want to grab everything that they have and put it in our little community and don't care about this stuff. But really, at the end of the day, what you create, that garden that you're creating so that you can create desert in the community surrounding you, one day you will have to pay. Instead of thinking, how can I make my garden just as good as their garden? How can I support them? How can I help them? And then we become friends, and then we have mutual economic and social interests that would bind us together. Because it's not only religion that would bind you together. We all know that, right? Because like there's even people in Israel right now who are too extremist for moderate and secular Israelis to live with. I heard so many Israelis that have left Jerusalem because they're too extremist in Jerusalem now, and they just went, I'm going to Tel Aviv.
Wow.
So it's like, how can we, instead of managing, how can we create, um, communities all around us that thrive? Why do we have to have all the wealth and then enslave the rest? Because really, at the end of the day, the Achilles heel of every empire is the tribes on the outskirts, the tribes that have not been fed, the tribes that have not been supported. And they're the ones that come and ransacked, if you look at the German tribes that ransacked Rome in the 4th century, if you look at even the Arabs that ransacked Jerusalem and the Byzantine Empire and went all the way to Constantinople, the Arab tribes, the Turkic tribes, it's those tribes that have been put to the fringes, not supported, not built, not brought into the alliance to, make distribute the wealth. It's all connected. I see it as an accountant. I see it as a, someone who studied history. I see that one way for the solution in the world is to actually share the wealth, not hoard it and then bomb them if they want a bit of it.
And looking at these like Christian and Muslim empires contrasted with, this modern Israeli empire, there's an exclusivist extra. Empire is already difficult and brutal and barbaric enough. But with the Israeli empire, there's a very exclusive messianic attachment to it. It builds a resentment towards the people around them that's a little bit extra special and unique to an exclusivist group of people.
You can't actually build an empire and say you're exclusive. Like,
that's right.
Nobody
you can't
else
build a
can
civilization. You can't build a civilization. Yeah.
No. So if you look at all the empires that succeeded and lasted for, whatever, 500 years, 1,000 years, it's because they embraced all the different cultural groups and tribes around them and said, everybody can do business. Just don't come and, challenge the emperor, whoever they were, whether they were Chinese or they were Turkish or English. If you embrace everybody and you go, look, we help you out, we help you out, we help you out. But the Israel empire will not succeed by saying only for the Jews.
Well, an empire builds and destroys, but for it to be an empire, it probably has to build at least 51% to 49% of destruction. If it doesn't, 100%. It'll end up destroying everything eventually. And also, look, I mean, I want to speak to the anti-Semitism here, essentially. I mean, because we do have a majority group of Eastern European settlers that have come to Israel that actually have a very small genetic link, to, if any, to the land there. And they are enacting acts of anti-Semitism against Semitic, Christian and Muslim populations in Palestine that have lived there for a long time. And I just I need to ask you a little bit about, the struggle of that. I mean, our society is so loaded up with language now and lexicon, and it's such an important part of the way we do things in this modern world. But anti-Semitism has been thrown around so much the last 2 years, and it's actually been used as a hood ornament for a car that's driving through a bloody, populations of people, as far as I'm concerned. So, how do you feel the narrative's going right now against Israel and their actions, not only against Christians, but, just against Palestinians and people throughout the Middle East? I mean, do you think that Israel is running out of steam here, but that they can't continue this kind of biblical, exclusivist, messianic approach to their neighbors and to the region?
No, I think they are running out of steam and running out of justifying narrative. But there is another narrative in the Israeli, population. It is small right now because it's been watered down. It's been, moved aside. It's been, shut down. And the narrative is the one that Yitzhak Rabin started 30 years ago, before they murdered him. So the people that murdered him are now in power. So we have to first remember that. Now, his vision was the right vision. Because if you sit down in the comfort of your own home, in the quietness, and think, what is the future of Israel in the Middle East, surrounded by Arab, Muslim, majority Muslim countries? What is what's the future? Do you wanna create that ghetto? Because that right now they are in the ghetto. Or do you want to kind of be part of this Middle East? Because really, at the end of the day, where you are, your geography determines your destiny. And Yitzhak Rabin with all his wisdom, he knew that at some point we have to make peace with the Arabs. But before we make peace with the Arabs, we have to make peace with the Palestinians. And he was spot on. Nobody will, nobody, like if you look at, if you take another 100 years in the future and look back at what he did the right thing. The right thing was to make peace with the Palestinians and work out a way where we can share the land. Anything that happened since then has brought everybody, whether Palestinian or Israeli, Jewish in the diaspora, Arabs all around the region, Western countries right now, nobody knows what to do, because you've actually you've created something that is an anomaly that is not, it's not sustainable. And Western leaders, in their wisdom, lack of, and also lack of courage, they can't actually say that where Israel is headed, it's headed in the wrong way. And at some point, it will be headed against Western interests, because Western interests will have to be including the Middle East in a harmony place in the Middle East, because it's the link between East and West. It's the link between, whether there's going to be a very rising, a big rising China or a lower rising China. The Middle East holds the key. And so if the Israelis keep bombing and killing more Palestinians, and it's not if, it's actually what is happening now, you've got 1 billion Arabs, 2 billion Muslims who are very anti-Israel right now. It's not going to help anybody.
And 1 billion Chinese too. There's a lot of people around the world now that are very against Israel.
Because you're just stuck in your head. We got to take the whole Holy Land, and we got to create the Greater Israel, and the land of the ancestors, and rather than because they're stuck in the history. We all get stuck in the history, but you also got to think about the future. What's the future of the people in front of you? The Israeli children, the Jewish children. Are you thinking about their future, or you're stuck in the history? Oh, I want to revive where Jacob was, and I want to get Jacob's well in Nablus, and I'm going to kick the Muslims out, and I'm going to destroy that church that has got Jacob's well, and I'm going to take it over. Like these settlers that are like messianic settlers coming in. Instead of thinking about the future children, you are thinking about going back to something that happened 2,000 years ago.
And it's something that it can only be empathized with via money and lobbying influence for so long, because of the exclusivist nature of it, because it really can't be shared. That's why there's a lot of people in China right now, and a lot of people in South America and Africa and people around the world going, we don't really like what you're doing.
No, it's not healthy.
This is the thing. No one can understand.
A lot of Jewish people I met also don't like it.
That's right. The sustained killing of children, for whatever excuse or reasoning, is not compatible when you can't share the story with anyone. No one can empathize with Israel's story right now. I think that's the biggest standout throughout the world. People don't like the killing of children, and whatever biblical or unreasonable excuse that they have for doing it is not quite catching with anyone, save for maybe a few remaining Christian Zionists.
The Zionists, they're not Christian.
That's right. Sorry, Zionists that are going down with the ship. So look, I do want to ask you, I know we've got to wrap it up, but do you see a brighter horizon in the future for Palestinians, and for people more broadly throughout the neighboring areas of Israel?
If you asked me that question 2 years ago, I would have said, oh yes, I've had dreams, and living side by side, and I was always pro. I'm still sort of pro two-state solution, and living with the Israelis or the Jewish people. But now it's sad. It's sad that there's so much blood has been spilled. I don't think you can go back and fix it on both sides. But the blood that has been spilled on the Palestinian side has been huge. And I don't think that the Palestinians would, whether they're Muslim or Christian, I've spoken to people, it's like, it's no way I want to talk to a Jewish person, but I'm talking to Jewish people. I want to keep the dialogue going, even though I've got family that died, I've got families that, their homes destroyed, everything that has been taken away from them, including my grandparents and everyone I know in my family, extended family. Over the past 80 years, I do have personally, every time I read the Bible, I believe in the redemption of the soul. And the biggest sinner can be redeemed. But that sinner needs to see where they're going wrong. And we all have to, on a personal level, we all have to see where we go wrong in life, because everybody does, and we have a blind spot. And we can justify anything in our personal life. We can justify anything on a state and international level to kill others and kick people out of your home and beat your wife and all these things. We can have a huge justification of why we've done that. We can even justify why we killed somebody. But then when we get touched by the Holy Spirit, I mean, I'm not preaching my Bible here, but it's kind of physics makes sense.
Look, you don't have to apologize for anything, Suzan. The faith component of your life is such a big part of who you are. I'm just taken aback constantly at the resilience and the true the hearts of the Palestinian people. And then
We're
it's the
beautiful.
ones. Yeah,
We're
you
so
are.
beautiful, Muslims and Christian. And sometimes I look at the Muslims and I think, oh my God, their heart is so pure and they're so nice and everything is inshallah and everything is like, thank God. Like, they're, one guy I know, he had 300 family members of his family die in Gaza, and he goes, Alhamdulillah, like, thank God. I mean, I don't know if I would be able to say that. The grace that they have is unbelievable. The faith is unshakable.
And
And we are
the
good
joy, the
people.
way you access, your spirit and character is beautiful. And so many Palestinians' characters and spirits are beautiful, despite everything, despite all the pressure, all the occupation, all the death and destruction, contrasted with these people that are taking everything from you, and they don't look very happy. They don't look like they have joy in their hearts. They don't look like they have the answers to a lot of the things that they're doing.
One thing we also like. I agree with that, but I want to show compassion to the Israeli people, because I think also they have been traumatized. I'm not justifying, I'm just saying they have been traumatized for thousands of years, and the Holocaust is a big thing for the Jewish people. And a lot of young Israelis are being brainwashed that if we don't defend Israel this way, we will end up in the gas chambers. So that mentality is driving them. And I think there's a lot of trauma that has been unprocessed, and a lot of trauma that has found that the only solution is firepower, more firepower, to stop the enemy, and they've created that as a result of trauma and untreated trauma as well. So I also want to include also the Israeli people, that their trauma needs to be healed as well. A lot of people say that the Palestinians are the victims of the victims, and now the victims are not seeing straight, they're not seeing reason, and they're doing things against their own religion as well. Overall, their religion stems from our religion as well. And if you talk to a Muslim guy, he will tell you, yes, all the Jewish prophets are in the Quran as well. For the Muslims, they say they're all Muslims, because the word Muslim means someone who submits to God's will.
But this is the problem with Judeo-Christian values, this term that's been thrust upon the world.
Judeo-Christian Muslim values.
That's right. And I mean, there's a segregation that's been done there to isolate certain groups from the others. But I mean, we have to also appreciate that there are Muslim families since the days of Salah ad-Din that have acted as patrons over Christian sites in the Holy Land. And we have to oppose that with some of these people in Israel that refer to parts of the Talmud that say some pretty horrible things about Jesus, about Mary, about Christians, and what could be designed upon them. And I just think there needs to be a reckoning there somewhere within that ancient religion, like maybe a software update somewhere along the line. There has been some before, something like this, that recognizes that denigrating, people that aren't yourselves isn't the way to thrive as a society or a culture or as a people, right?
The extremism is ugly. It's ugly on any side, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, or even communist. Extremism is or capitalist. We've seen all the extremism of all isms that has really have not benefited society. It's destroyed millions of people.
Fundamentalism. Yes. These sort of beliefs that go beyond reason and logic.
Yes.
Look,
indeed.
Could I ask you one last question, Suzan? Now I've got you. I would like to ask you, what if you have a message or something that you would like to see from, global Christian communities and communities more broader, what they can do, or what you would like to see from global Christian communities with regards to the plight of Palestinian and Palestinian Christians.
They have to stand with Palestine. They have to stand with the Palestinian people, whether we're Muslim or Christian, because our cause is a noble one. We've been driven out of our homes, our land, and put into camps, refugee camps, denied all basic freedom of movement, freedom of, even like for Palestinian Christians, we can't even go to the holy sites unless we get a permit. Just to give an example, every year the Israeli government issues maybe 5,000 or 6,000 permits to go to visit the Holy Sepulchre. But there's 50,000 Christians in the West Bank. Why do they need a permit in the first place? They should go to the checkpoint, show their passport that shows that they're Christian, because it's showing on Palestinian passport, and then they can go to the Holy Sepulchre. Why do they have to apply for a permit? And sometimes the permits that they apply for, it's given to one family member and not the other one. So you might get, your husband, your wife, your 2 children, and the other 2 children are staying home. So we want to say to the Christians that they need to support Palestinian Christians, Palestinian Christian presence in the Holy Land. We've been there for 2,000 years. We did not show up. We did not convert. And having the Palestinian Christian presence is very important for the future of Christianity, because we're custodians of the Holy Land, the holy sites. We're custodians also of the theology, because it stemmed from there. And if you read Palestinian Christian theology that has been created by a few theologians, it's a whole body of research on Christian theology and what liberation means within the context of the Israeli occupation and what's happening. I mean, these textbooks are, they need to be taught at Christian seminaries. Books read, written by Naim Atik, Dr. Mitri Raheb, Munder Isaac, all these Palestinian Christian theologians that have written a whole body of thought on how do we deal with what is happening to the Palestinian Christians in Palestine. Embrace us, embrace the theology that we've created, Palestinian Christian liberation theology. I think it needs
awareness.
We need a new movement in Christian theology to embrace our Palestinian Christian liberation theology.
Awareness about the situation, the 70-year plus situation in Palestine, has become ubiquitous in the globe, just through people just looking back by going, oh, why is all this killing happening, and just looking into it. And Palestinian awareness is now a mainstream issue. We never would have thought that this would have been the case 2 years ago, the way it has been. But the same way with the plight of Christians. I mean, I don't want to point towards, any right-wing pundits or anything, but, Tucker Carlson in the United States, since he's gone independent, he's been speaking to some prominent Palestinian Christian voices and amplifying those voices. And it seems to be having a bit of an impact, especially amongst the Christian population in America, which has a very, interesting connection to Israel. And I'm wondering if this awareness is starting to inform Christian populations more broadly across the world, and if they're starting to drop that Zionist footnote that really is a heresy according to their Bible.
Heresy, indeed. Yeah. Well, once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. So once you explain to people the context of this conflict, or this war, this conflict, it's not a conflict, it's a war on the indigenous people of Palestine to drive them out of their homes. And it's been going on for nearly 150 years since the Zionists came. So whatever the settlers even now doing in 2025, the original settlers back in 1870 did the same, to drive the fallahin, or the Palestinian farmers off the land that they were cultivating. And they, fence it, and they start shooting them and killing them, and moving from one farm to another, one small plot of land to another. So the dispossession that has been going on for that long was, was hidden from the world, and also definitely hidden from the Christian, church. And it culminated in 1948, where masses of people were driven off their homes and villages, and villages, completely destroyed, homes being taken over. But once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. And once you make that connection, that 1948 is still with us in 2025, and it froze in time, because the people that you are killing in Gaza, 75% of them are those refugees that were driven out of their homes in 48. They're, they are still people who are still alive. Like my dad is still alive. He's 82 years old. He was 6 years old when it happened, and he walked with his parents out of their home in 48, a home that my grandparents newly built. And so there are people who are still alive from 1948 and know what really happened. But the generations that came after, 3-4 generations, born in the camps, born into the story that we will go back. We will go back to our homes, because that was the promise of the United Nations. And a lot of people don't realize that the premise of the establishment of the State of Israel and its inclusion into the United Nations was on the condition that the Israeli government, the Israeli state, once it was established and accepted into the United Nations, that they would accept to bring back the Palestinian refugees that were driven out. And so, from the Palestinian perspective, well, that's the law. That's international law, right? That they now want to destroy, of course, for obvious reasons. The destruction of the United Nations is something that they would be working towards, because that means international law would not exist, and that means the law of the jungle will exist. And if we took the land by force, then the land is ours. And so when you see it in that perspective, you realize, wow, what you are trying to do is bomb these refugees or the descendants of the refugees, so that they don't have any hope or any reason for them to go back to. But the premise of your country that has been accepted into the United Nations is based on me as a refugee going back to my home. So I think if you look back at the genocide that has happened the past 2 years, and you realize, well, that's the consequence of not dealing with that. And it would have been the natural evolution of events to get to that point if you don't want to change. But I want to remind everybody here that there is a group of people in Israel who wanted that change before we get to the genocide point. And that was Yitzhak Rabin, who said, we need to make peace with the Palestinians and live side by side. And that genocide would have been prevented. And all the the bombings and all these things that happened to Israel for the past 30 years would have been prevented as well. Just imagine what could have happened. And I think if we want to think about what the future should hold, we should take that point and say, what kind of future do we want to create? Not what, it's all doom and gloom and the world's going to go to shit. And the prophecy, and the Scofield Bible, end times and all that. No, what if we say we want to imagine a better future where we actually sit down and talk to people and see each other's humanity, and stop making each other monsters, and stop being monsters, so that we can create a better future where we don't commit genocide, and genocide is not committed on us. Just imagine if we just now say, I want to, put a line in the sand, and I want to change something. It might take 2 or 3 generations, but the fork in the sand, the fork in the road, we need to move that away, go back. It's the wrong way to keep going on the freeway of genocide. We got to take the exit. We're going to take the exit point.
Really appreciate you saying that, Suzan. It's just so impressive to have someone like yourself not only turning the other cheek, pardon the the pun or whatever it is, but also offering solutions, trying to come up with some ideas that good for everyone concerned, and it just takes an incredible courage and a real fire, and I can see that that you go back to day dot for a lot of things, not just Christianity, but you're channeling an energy that's very impressive, and we can't thank you enough for coming on the program today. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for listening.